Hey YouTube, it's me, Brandon Colonel. This video is basically going to be a bit of an extension on what I did last night, which was actually probably more along the lines of early this morning, seeing as it was probably like around the 1-ish a.m. area. But basically I'm just telling you that I'm giving up on trying to find the limits of this thing, because I'm almost out of boxes. I think that I got to around maybe 15, 20 boxes maybe, and yeah, that's about twice the size of what it was when I showed you in the last video. But yeah, easily I think this could probably handle about maybe 40 boxes before it really shows signs of really slowing down. I mean, seriously, it's just not really slowing down at all. I'm just going to continue on with the sharpening video because it is starting to get a bit of a tooth along the edge, which is what I really don't like. But no matter what you do, it's still a phenomenal cutter. I can't drop it through paper like I used to, and the knife is starting to hesitate in certain areas if you don't get the cut perfect. But yeah, like I can't really just drop it through paper like I used to. Like it'll still do it somewhat, but nowhere near as fast. And if I really try to go fast, then there's more of a chance of that. So this is a point when I would usually sharpen a knife anyways. But as far as it being incredibly dull, which is what I was really kind of hoping to do, no. And I'm not the kind of person that'll just simply randomly take a knife and like take a piece of granite and just stroke it across the granite a couple of times, so that way I can ensure that the knife is completely dull to the point where I might as well just be taking the knife and going like this. I mean, if the edge can still cut paper, yeah, you get what I'm saying. But yeah, so this is about the point when I would typically sharpen a knife anyways, unless it's just like one of those days where like I'm just starting off a new day of school, or I'm just going back to work after a really long period of time, or something along those lines, where I just want everything to be new. I want my battery to be fresh. I want a new haircut. I want to have just taken a shower. My shoes are nice and polished or nice and brushed, and basically the only thing left is I need a new edge on my knife. Now, like I may have literally sharpened it 3 days prior, but I want everything to just be new. So I'll sharpen my knives just for that purpose. Otherwise, this is about the edge that I would be looking for before I actually sharpen it. Now, to actually get into what I'm going to be using, basically this is the Lansky System Sharpener that I think that I reviewed it at one point when I was basically doing my how I sharpen video, which is where I was basically just describing everything. Since then, I've perfected my sharpening techniques, and I've also adopted a new excuse me. I've also adopted a few new techniques, and so basically this is going to be an actual sharpening video, just showing you how I truly do it. And now, granted, I'm telling you right now, this is going to be a bit of a process. So, as you can probably see from the time, which this is my first take right now, so I have no clue how long this is truly going to take. But you can probably look down at the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, and it'll probably tell you, well, I think it's bottom right-hand corner. Yep. Well, it's one of the bottom corners. I don't really look at that too often. But either way, look at how long it's going to take. You may just want to start skipping through it at certain portions, or if you want to actually see everything along the lines, there's probably not going to be too much talking. It's because it's more going to be me just simply doing the process. but I will be testing the knife out during various portions, and I'll be giving a little bit of dialogue, but not too much. But yeah, these are basically everything that I've got, which I still don't like to use the system very much. Um, there's um, there's just something about using system sharpeners to me, just me personally. Anybody else who does, not knocking you at all, because something like the Edge Pro Apex, or for the people who can easily use these things in the same way. Not trying to knock you, not trying to diss you. Just for me personally, I feel that there's something lost in the art of knife sharpening when you use some kind of a system. I just feel there's something lost in it. Um, I mean, this is, to me, the microwave generation. If it's not done in 5 minutes, then it's not worth doing. If it takes any kind of time, if it takes any kind of effort, or heaven forbid, if it takes any kind of skill, then nobody's going to do it. Well, I'm the kind of person who's heavily influenced by Japanese arts when it comes to basically anything with a blade. Um, I'm very heavily influenced by the Japanese. Um, I actually hope to one day make my own knife. I'll have to learn a lot about how to do it, but I do hope to one day make my own, and I'll probably be making it in a Japanese style. Um, just something along those lines. I'll even see if I can't find somebody to show me how to make a hamon line. But, um, but yeah, one thing that I've just always done, basically since the beginning, um, I learned how to hand sharpen a knife. Now, don't get me wrong, I did start off using pull-through sharpeners, but basically, the second that I got my first hand sharpener, like it free hand sharpener, I never really went back, and I never used a pull-through sharpener after that, unless I was really just looking for something quick and on the go that I could stick in my pocket, and that I could just always take with me. Ever since I've started getting higher end knives, like Kershaw's or even ZT's, I don't think that I've ever carried a pull-through sharpener in my pocket since. But yeah, so on to the actual sharpening video. In this kit, I actually took out two of the stones that are in here, and I replaced them with these two. This is the sapphire stone, which is 2000 grit, and this is the leather stropping hone. But the only thing that I really don't use in here, besides the actual system itself, is this 280 grit medium stone. The reason why I don't use this is because typically the only reason why I would ever use this is for like chips and cracks in the blade. Otherwise, I just don't use this thing at all. Um, I would actually go so far as to say that for me, this is a reprofiling stone. Because if I'm reprofiling something, I want it to be really slow, so that way I can really gauge just how long it's well, not just how long, but just how far the edge is progressing. The 180 grit stone is if I'm really, really wanting to go to town on something, or if the steel is really difficult to work with. Like, yeah, let me see, where did I put that one? I just had my other ZT on me. Here we go. Sorry for all of the moving around. This should be one of the last times. I think there's probably going to be one more time late in the video. At one point I did reprofile this. Don't ask me about angles, because honestly I don't know angles completely. I do everything freehand, so I can tell you approximately. I would probably have put somewhere along the lines of a 20, maybe 19 degree angle on this thing. That's about all that I can guess, because because I know that 25 degrees is what they recommend on most knives, and when I put that on with the system sharpener, the 25 degrees, it wasn't good enough for me. And then I sharpened it at my own angle. It was much sharper, and I think the 20 degree on here also just wasn't good enough. So it's probably either 20 degrees or 19 degrees, or just somewhere close to it. But otherwise, I can't really tell you. But the only time when I actually use a 180 stone is when I was reprofiling this, and seeing as this is LMAX stainless steel, this is really tough stuff, as I have also seen with this knife. LMAX, this thing can take a punch. Yeah, that's happening more and more now, which is why I'm finally getting into it. But if you can keep the right angle, this thing will still keep on going. I mean, honestly, I think that this edge could outlast the Energizer Bunny. But yeah, so yeah, this is the point when I would resharpen a knife anyways. But so, the first stone that I'm going to be starting off with is this 600 stone. This is considered to be the fine grit stone, but this is about as gritty as I need it to be. So I'll take some of the honing solution that came with it, just to rub a stream of it down here. I always like to keep contact with the stone whenever I'm putting on the oil, so that way I can really control just how much of it comes out. If I'm holding it up here, then there's just going to be a mess everywhere. But actually keeping contact with it and going back, I can put out exactly how much I want to. And just rub it in. I like to rub it in pretty well. Then I just rub off whatever excess oil. Just rub it off on my pants leg or something. And then from here, get some of that stuff out of the background. Okay. From here, this is basically where I'm just going to keep it at. When I'm starting off on this kind of a stone with the 600 grit, then this is where I'm just initially doing the edge, and so it still takes a lot of focus for me, but I can concentrate on other things at the same time, because I can really keep a consistent edge doing this, but also going back and forth. That really keeps the edge nice and consistent, but at the same time, I'm really going by feel. I'm more paying attention to the feel of it. If it doesn't feel smooth enough, then I'm not moving on. People who do like the Edge Pro Apex, or even the Lansky system sharpener that I have, a lot of them focus more on counting and making sure that they have the exact right amount of strokes. For me, if it doesn't feel right, then I'm not going on. But this is starting to feel pretty good. So I'm just going to wipe off the blade. Yeah, that's already starting to come along and look a lot better. Another thing that I do is I pull back the skin on my finger, so that way I expose the nail. And I just run it along the blade, feeling for any kind of tugs, because any kind of tug will tell me that there's a tooth somewhere in the blade. Yeah, I've already gotten basically all of my edge back, but it still just doesn't completely feel right. So, which means that basically I know that I can still get it better. I think I actually rubbed off too much oil in the beginning, so I've got to put some more oil on here. And mind you, if you do the same technique that I do, just to pour it on like that, mind you, I'm not putting any pressure on the bottle. So rub it in there. Personally, when you first start out sharpening knives, um, I would recommend that you get a couple of really cheap knives that can still hold a good edge. That's a definite must. Find it find a few really cheap knives that can still hold a good edge, and practice on those. You're really going for the sound that it makes. You're going for a consistent sound both backwards and forwards. Um, if it's not making the same sound, that means that you changed your angle, you've changed your pressure, you've changed something about the way that you're doing it. But it really goes um, by feel, by sound, just everything about the way that you're doing this. It really makes a difference. But yeah, I recommend finding the angle that works for you. Just on those cheap, maybe $15 knives. You can probably find a couple of really cheap Kershaws that'll work out very well, because even the really cheap Kershaws typically use 8CR13 MOV, and there's actually a person in my church that I know who he got two Kershaws in the same box for like $20, which means that they're like $10 knives, and he even still carries some of those. But both of them can get razor sharp. Not quite like this. I mean, this is just butter. This is the edge that I'm used to on this thing. This is just beautiful. Yeah, I'm really happy with this. I'm probably going to go for just maybe a couple more passes, because it still feels just a little gritty. But as for what I was saying, uh, start off on those really cheap Kershaws, and find an edge that works really well for you. One sec. Just going to take my pajama pants here. I don't really have any towels handy right now. And from here, just to rub off all the extra crap, particularly what came off of my pants here. I really like to make sure that my stone is clean before I put it back. Okay, that's pretty good. And already the edge on this thing is looking pretty good. I'm already starting to get a bit of a polish to it. Don't know just how well you guys are able to see that, because I do not have the best video, on top of the fact that just the angle that I'm putting it at, I can't see it that well. So if it comes across better on your end, great. That's what I'm really hoping for. Put this to the side. Yeah, that is absolutely phenomenal. So the next stone that I'm going to is the 1000 grit stone. Some might even just simply consider this to be a hone instead of a stone, because it doesn't take off enough steel to really sharpen this thing at all. Like you would really have to be working at this thing for quite a bit in order for this to actually sharpen much of anything. You actually don't need quite as much oil for this one. Because this just glides across no matter what. But I still do put a decent amount of oil on it anyways, but I don't rub it in quite as well. And it just doesn't quite need it. Let me get my leg comfortable there. And this one I actually do count out the strokes, but I go back, I go forward and back, so that's one. But I do 100 strokes per side, which really equals out to 200 since I'm going back as well. But this one is where I'm really focusing because I've got to make sure that I get an equal amount of strokes. And then when I finally got to that 100th stroke, if you saw, I slowed down on the backstroke so I could really get a feel of it, of just how well that edge is really coming along, whether it feels gritty or if it feels really smooth. And I do the same with the first stroke on the other side when I flip it over. Okay, then from here, and I take a couple of strokes back and forward, which I don't really need to count these out, but because right now what I'm really doing is I'm actually getting off all the burrs, and I'm making sure that everything is about as even as I can get it. I'll just wipe it off. Let's take a look at the edge. I'm already starting to get a polish coming through now. For whatever reason, on my particular knife, this side just never really wants to accept a true mirror polish on it. I don't know why, but it just, for whatever reason, it just doesn't. And this is proof right here that the smoother you get that edge, the easier it's just going to glide through whatever you put in front of it. It's not even coming off my finger before like it did with the last stone. That is a truly perfected edge, and I'm not even done. And then whenever I do that, just to make sure that everything's still perfect, then I usually take a couple more strokes on here just to put it back to that edge that I had at before I did anything like that. And I always make sure to close my knife in between steps so that way if ever I reach for it without really looking at it, then I don't accidentally touch an edge. Which at this point, it is going to be razor sharp. If I put down the knife at any point in time, I can guarantee you it's going to be razor sharp during this process. So I always make sure to close it. Some people don't. Some people just put it off to the side. It's just a safety thing for me. And just make sure that everything is nice and clean. Now on to the 2000 grit sapphire stone. A nice layer of oil on it. And then do the same exact process that I did with the 1000 grit stone. And if at any point in time it just all of a sudden feels really gritty, it probably means one of two things. Either you elevated your angle too much, and then you all of a sudden maybe caught a tooth that you didn't catch beforehand during an earlier process. That's something that I've noticed before. Or you've actually de-elevated the edge, and now you're starting to get past your grind, and it's starting to get back on the edge. It's not the edge here that you cut with, but like the grind right here. I've noticed that, and it's very minute amounts. Like I'm talking about going from here to here. Like it's really not that much. I mean, if you can see just how much I'm twisting my hand right now, that's about all that it takes. It is really not that much. Yeah, still feeling a little bit toothy, so I'll make sure to come back and hit that a second. Well, not toothy, but still a little bit gritty, so I'll have to come back and make sure that I hit that again. Now this is where I'm going back over the edge, making sure that I've gotten particularly this side, but I'm going backwards just to make sure that I keep the even amount of strokes. So I'm basically just incorporating a secondary process in this on this side with the final process that I did on the 1000 grit stone, where I'm just going back and forth, making sure that everything's about as even as I can get it, knocking off the burrs. So I'm basically incorporating 2 steps into one right here. But I need to make sure that this side is as smooth as I can get it. Because if one side isn't as smooth as the other, then it's just not going to get to where it needs to be. But for whatever reason, no matter what, I can't seem to get the striations completely out of this side. There's, for whatever reason, striations here that are clearly visible on the blade. It doesn't impede the performance at all. This is the sharpest knife that I own. But yeah, for whatever reason, those striations just simply won't leave on that side. Yeah, the polish is really coming out on this side pretty well, but the striations on this side just won't seem to leave. Don't quite know what that's about, but as you're about to see, it does not hurt the performance. See what I mean? The knife's not even coming off my fingers. That was user error. I just can't even tell you guys how sharp this thing is right now. So to me, this is just the best way that a knife can be sharpened. Just for me personally, it's just a better level of quality control. If it gets screwed up, there's nobody to blame but yourself. You can't start blaming the tool that you use, saying, "Oh, this thing screwed up on me, so it screwed up my knife edge." You can't blame the company saying, "Oh, you made a bad product. Since you made a bad product, then it put a bad edge on my knife, and now I can't use my knife because it's not sharp anymore." As long as you take care of your stones, you're the only person you can blame. And honestly, I kind of like that. I'm holding myself accountable for the edge on my knife. Whereas the pull-through sharpeners, once it stopped putting a good edge on my knives, I found myself either blaming the tool or blaming the company themselves, saying, "Oh, you can't put a good edge on a knife. It won't get sharp." There was the first decent quality knife that I got was it was a CRKT. It was a CRKT M16-02Z. You can find a review on that that I've made earlier. Which the reason why I'm taking off my belt right now is this is actually the next step that I use. I basically just attached this part right here to like my toe or something. Which, let me get rid of all this paper over here. Yeah, I'll definitely have to clean that up later. But I've probably got somewhere that I need to be going to, probably within the next 10 minutes or so, so I've actually got to hurry up on this. So let me get my foot extended out. And I start off, just for me, with the bottom portion that would usually be touching at my waist. And then I basically just stick up my knee, so that way it's really nice and taut right here. And then I do the same 100 strokes back, like this. And here the angle doesn't matter quite as much, but it does make a difference if you just start going all over the place with it. But yeah, the edge is not quite as important when you're stropping it. But if you're really trying to put a mirror polish on, it does help to keep the same angle that you've been using. But otherwise, it doesn't make all that big of a difference to the edge itself. It's not like you're really sharpening it with leather. It's really just standing up the steel. There are leather strops you can use that actually do cut the metal, which cutting is basically what you're doing with any stone. But there are strops you can use that do that. But otherwise, it's not really going to make that big of a difference to keep a different angle on a strop. Say hello to my mother. I will. I'm making the video. I'll be there. Okay. That was my mother, or at least the voice of my mother. Yeah, I'll probably be back at college within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Honestly, I can't wait to get back. Okay, and now what I just did now is I flipped the belt over because this is a finer grain than what this is, so it'll definitely get a better polish on it. Which it's already really starting to come out now. That's even better than what it was on a 2000 grit stone. Okay, and then that's done for the belt. And now I go on to the leather strap that actually came with it, with the Lansky sharpener. And then I just do the same system that I've been doing with it, basically the past four steps. It's the same 100 strokes. And as usual, just take a couple of strokes back and forth like this, making sure to knock off any burrs that were formed. And also kind of loosens up your fingers a little bit, because typically whenever I'm doing this, then all the strokes one way really just kind of tightens up the grip on your hand, and it just steady back and forth, it kind of loosens them up a little bit. Okay. Now that is an incredibly sharp knife. Not a single tooth to be found. This thing is incredibly sharp, and because of this L-Max, it is incredibly durable. If this thing it makes contact with the paper, it's going to cut it clean through. It just simply has to make that contact. This thing is just razor sharp. And this is just the kind of edge that you can get just by hand sharpening. If I can manage to get a better strop, then I can guarantee that I can put a complete mirror polish on every single knife that I own. Probably the best hand polish that I can get on a knife is with my ZT-0561. Again, don't know just how well you guys can see that because it's not coming across very well on my camera. But this thing is borderline mirror polish. The other one, which I do not have with me right now, it's somewhere all the way across the room, is my Kershaw Asset, which I think I actually posted a picture of that one on my Facebook page for it, which you guys can go check out the Facebook page. It's just Brandon Colonel on Facebook. Just find that. But yeah, I've got a decent picture showing the polish on that one as well, and the polish just really likes to come out on this one and the Kershaw Asset. For whatever reason, the only side that this likes to actually show the polish is this side here. The other side likes to show a bunch of striations on it. So, see, told you guys it would be really long. I'm almost at 46 minutes now. But yeah, this is just the type of edge you can that you can get coming standard from a hand sharpening job. Now, as you can tell, being 45 minutes in, and maybe I spent 7 minutes talking beforehand, it's a pretty lengthy process. But you feel a little bit closer to your work once you're done. I mean, before when I was testing out the system sharpener and seeing how well it actually did with the system, then I didn't really feel all that close to it. I invested time into learning how to use it, but I just didn't feel all that close to the work. Once it was done, I felt that every edge that I put on it was disposable. Whereas this one, it's like you put it on there yourself. You want it to last as long as you can now. You want it to look as good as you can for as long as you can. And you almost feel guilty about using it afterwards. But then, about maybe a day or two into using it again, and you're like, oh yeah, this is a knife. I can sharpen it at any point in time. I don't need to feel guilty about it. But like the second that you put that edge on, every time you make a cut, you see me going back to the strop. It's because I just put it on there and I want it to stay pretty as long as possible. So you feel really close to it, and it's like you're really proud of it. You want it to stay looking like that forever. And I was just looking back at all this crap cardboard that's down here, just cluttering up my floor. Just thinking about that kind of makes me feel a little bit easier about this blade, because like I said, there's there's maybe 15-20 pieces of cardboard, well, not pieces of cardboard, but 15, maybe 20 boxes of cardboard down there in my floor right now, and I barely even lost the polish on this knife, which tells you just how well ZT's LMAX can actually handle uh, uh, being that sharp and used that heavily. So honestly, that was about 6 months to a year's worth of actual cutting on this knife. I went through it in a matter of maybe a total of 3 hours, and that's just because I was taking my time with cutting certain parts, and also I was watching videos during the entire time. So that actually even just made it take longer than it would have, because otherwise I probably would have made it through all that cardboard in probably an hour, maybe less. I mean, it just flew through all of it without a single problem. There was no hiccups anywhere. But yeah, so really, if anybody tells you that in order to get an amazing edge on your knives, you have to use something like an Edge Pro Apex or the Lansky system sharpener like what I have, they're lying to you. They're just straight up lying to you. You do not need to have some fancy $200 system sharpener in order to get an edge like this on your knives. It may not take quite as long to do it with something like the Edge Pro, but honestly, it's just a more satisfying result to be able to say that you did this all by hand. I mean, there was a time when people would tell me that they just did all of their sharpening completely by hand, and and then I would look at the edge and I was like, seriously, you're actually telling me that you did that by hand? I don't freaking believe you. Now that was when I first started getting into knives, but there was a time when even I did that, and because all that I would use beforehand is a pull-through sharpener. But then I finally got used to hand sharpening, and I was like, wow, you actually can get a really good edge just by doing it by hand. And then I started getting really good quality stones, like is in this, which, like I said in the first sharpening video that I did, just the way that you can hold this, it's really good. It feels really good in the hand, and there's not really any threat of you cutting yourself all that easily. I mean, with it going back and forth like on the stones, there actually was one time when I went back too far, then I just barely tapped myself right here. This exact knife actually, and then it made a bit of a cut right here on my wrist. I mean, I barely tapped myself, and there was already blood coming out. But yeah, just don't let anybody tell you that hand sharpening is an inferior way. I mean, sharpening a katana, basically the only way to do it properly is to sharpen it by hand. Let me actually fix this now that I'm not sharpening anymore. Uh, Basically, the only way to sharpen a katana is to do it by hand. I mean, people use pull-through sharpeners on katanas all the time, but that's honestly not the proper way to do it. And it actually ruins the edge geometry to use a pull-through sharpener on a katana. But knives, pull-through sharpeners are okay, especially for people who just don't know how to do it. But if you're getting any kind of a quality knife at all, I really suggest that you stop using pull-through sharpeners and do it by hand. Now, if you really just cannot keep your hands still for anything, or no matter what you do, you just can't keep a consistent edge or consistent angle, I mean, then by all means, go ahead and use a system sharpener. There's not going to be any shame in using that if you admit for just like 100% that you cannot keep a consistent edge. You've tried, you really gave it an honest try, but no matter what, you just can't do it. If you do that and you really give it an honest shake, there's no shame in using a system. But honestly, if you've never tried it before, you're just saying, oh, well, I know that I'll screw it up. Like I said, try on really cheap, inexpensive knives that can still hold an edge, and a really good edge, mind you, but that can still hold a good edge, good enough to slice paper. Practice. I mean, you think I was getting edges like this overnight? I mean, there's no way that I can make an edge like this on my first try. I mean, there is just no way. I twisted in the knife for the last second. But there's just no way that I can make an edge like this without practice. I know what I'm doing now. So therefore, I can make edges like this in my sleep. It is not even a problem for me. But yeah, just to make sure that that you guys actually try to do something by hand before you just automatically pass it off as saying, oh, that is completely impossible to do by hand. Knife sharpening by hand is completely out of the realm of possibilities for me. Try it. Go buy some kind of a whetstone. You don't have to go out and spend $100 on Japanese water stones or anything like that. But I would suggest putting about the same amount of money that you would put into some of the knives in your collection. Put the same amount of money into it, into your stones. I mean, honestly, I've probably got close to $100. Well, no, actually, just in the Lansky system, I've got about $120. But really, all that I spent the majority of my money on the stones. This, in and of itself, the kit was probably about $35. I spent probably about another $36 on the curved stones, and then I spent about $15 each on just these two. So yeah, probably about $120 total once everything was all said and done. But yeah, invest in a good sharpening kit. Which even if this system is all that you get, then I think it's like the Lansky Sharpening Pro or something like that. Even if this is all that you get, then get it for just the stones, and then spend the extra $30 and get the sapphire and the strop. And I can guarantee you that you'll be happy with it. And if you get the curved stones, which is like an extra $36 to $40, depending on where you get them, then you can now sharpen recurves as well, and you can get the same consistent edge on them. One thing that I did have to do with the curved stones, though, is I actually did take my diamond file and I had to smooth them out. I had to smoothen them out a little bit. Make sure to keep rotating them like this, so that way you can keep the curve in them. But I did have to smoothen them out a little bit because the edge came a little bumpy. But so I'll cut it off right here because I should have left about 10 minutes ago. But yeah, as always, YouTube, stay safe.